If you want to understand what a country truly depends on, do not listen to what it says and look at what it imposes, because imposes are not opinions, they are constraints. Let's go back to the data we analyzed. In 2000, China's import structure was dominated by machinery, equipment, and semiconductors. With machinery alone accounted for more than 40% and semiconductor roughly 25%. Data tells you something very simple but very important. At that point, China didn't yet have a complete industrial system. It had to import a capability in order to build one. In other words, China's ability to produce was still dependent on external technology. Now, fast forward to 2025, and the structure begins to shift. Machinery imports decline to around 34%. Semiconductor remain significant, but no longer dominate in the same level. While at the same time, raw material begins to take a much larger share in iron ore, oil, copper, lithium. So what actually changed? China is no longer primarily importing capability. It is sourcing resources to sustain a system it has already built. And that is a fundamental shift from needing others to produce to needing inputs to scale what it can already produce. Now let's push this one step further. When a country depends on imported machinery, it is effectively dependent on someone else's technology, which means its production capability is externally constrained. But when a country depends on raw materials, the nature of that constraint changes. The resources are still a constraint, but they are a different kind of constraint. They can be sourced from multiple regions, negotiated across a supplier, and secure through long-term investment or strategic agreements. This is no longer passive dependency, it becomes active configuration. And this is where power begins to shift, because the question is no longer, can I produce? The question becomes, where and how do I source what I need to produce at a scale? Now connect this back to what we discussed in the previous episode. The China exports a system and industrial products, and to sustain that system, it imports resources at scale, which means that China sits in the middle of global flow. The resources come in, manufacturing transform them, and products and components move out. This is not just a trade. This is a system behavior. And once a country operates at that level, its roles changes. It is no longer just a part of the system, it begins to shape how the system itself works. So here is a simple way to think about it. If a country imports a technology, it is still learning how to build. If a country imports resources, it already knows how to build. And it's now scaling that capability. That is that differences. And that differences is exactly what we are seeing in the data. In the next episode, we will take this one step further because once a country moves beyond dependency, the next question becomes even more important. Can it control the supply chain itself?